My name's Danny and I'm an addict and I'm a member of the World Board. I was actually elected at the last WSC, which was held virtually. Kind of funny how things work out, right? Um, so like, what does virtual meetings mean? There's a couple different terminologies that have been thrown out, like online meetings, virtual meetings. Uh, I don't know that we've settled on language yet because there seems to be different interpretations of what virtual means and online means. So the term virtual meeting is like a working name for now. And so the term virtual means simply a venue where a meeting is held that is not in an in-person space where you'd be in a brick and mortar setting. Could be online, it could be by phone or any other medium that is not in a physical in-person location. And so there's a resource page that's up, NA.org/virtual. It's akin to the local resources page, if anyone's familiar with that. There's a web page that's been around for a very long time. It used to be an FTP site. If anybody remembers those days. FTP, and it's just a bunch of different resources that have been developed all over the world. And this is very akin to that. There's some resources that are related to things that have happened with NA World Services, particularly with the worldwide webinars that have occurred in the last few years. Also, if you have any resources, please send them to us to wb@na.org or worldboard@na.org. And if you look at those resources, there's a lot of people that are in this meeting right now that have contributed resources from all over the world, all over the world. So a little history of virtual meetings. I did a little bit of archaeology, like admittedly, like I was like 10 when like a lot of the stuff was happening. So Narcotics Anonymous put up their first website in the early 90s. I saw like an article from the Newsline that they registered a domain called WSOinc.com. I actually went on the Wayback Machine, which I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Wayback Machine, but it's a website that allows you to go back and look at old websites and like snapshots of what those websites look like at a given period of time. And it was a very bare bones website. Basically all text. And but virtual meetings have been around for a really long time in the definition that I gave. Virtual meetings have been around since the 90s and as early back as 93 when the internet became commercialized, the World Wide Web became commercialized, and dial-up internet was made available to consumers in their home. And like addicts, we find ways and means to do what we need to do to, in this case, get one more meeting. And in 2003, World Services started listed for the first time ever 2 virtual meetings. At WSC 2004, there was some earlier discussions at the conference. There was some discussion at WSC 99. But at WSC 2004, there was a straw poll that was taken to indicate if there was a consensus among the delegates to list virtual meetings, and there wasn't really a strong consensus. There was some concerns about virtual meetings at that time. And since then, the fellowship largely has not addressed virtual meetings. There's been a community of virtual meetings that have existed way before the pandemic started, meeting on a variety of meetings like chat, IRC, which is Internet Relay Chat. There have been phone-based meetings with like free conference calling lines. And as you know, technology has become better, internet speeds have become better. Essentially, if you studied Moore's law, the creation of the microprocessor and how quickly like technology like evolves and like the cost of being able to purchase that technology as a consumer has made this technology more and more available. Cell phones were certainly not what they are today. And so you've seen the evolution of virtual meetings follow a trend where there was an accessibility. With the advent of Skype, a lot of people were using Adobe Connect for virtual service delivery. I know the World Service Conference instituted virtual work groups at WSC 2014, and now many groups using Zoom or BlueJeans or other technology. So at WSC 2018 was the first time the WSC did not do motions during new business and ran an experiment with new business discussion. If anybody remembers, if they were at WSC 2018, there was a survey that was put out, and those survey items were voted on by the fellowship at the conference, by the delegates at the conference. And then the top 4 topics were selected for small group roundtable discussion. And one of the highest prioritized items was a discussion on virtual meetings. And so the delegates went into various different conference rooms and discussed virtual meetings. There was a CP webinar in April of 2019 where the delegates discussed furthering that discussion from the conference. And then there was the first open worldwide webinar in September of 2019 on virtual meetings. The LAZF, the Latin American Zonal Forum, was actually the first time a zonal forum presented a motion in the CAR, and that motion was to create a piece of, service material on virtual meetings. Little did we know it, in March of 2020, there would be a global pandemic that would be declared, and most of Narcotics Anonymous went virtual immediately. And so we, as a fellowship, learned very quickly. We leveraged other people, experienced members that had been using similar technology and had experience running virtual meetings, and the fellowship evolved very, very rapidly. The WSC was canceled for the first time and was held virtually for the first time. It was held in 2 parts, one part at the end of April, beginning of May, and the other part in August. And here we are now with the Local Service Toolbox project. So I wanted to cover hybrid meetings a little bit. So hybrid meeting is generic terminology that we're hearing the fellowship use. There doesn't seem to be necessarily there's some general universality to the definition, but I've categorized the definition into 3 different categories. So category number 1 is a virtual meeting. A hybrid meeting is a meeting that is virtual first, meaning its primary functionality is that it resides in a virtual location first, meaning it's locationless. It doesn't have a latitude and longitude. And then there are people that may be attending from physical locations, either in clusters or in a single location. The second one is probably the more frequently understood one from what we're hearing, which is meetings that meet in a physical location, a physical venue, an in-person venue that have latitude and longitude, and they have people attending remotely. And then the third definition, which we've also seen some groups doing, is they have meetings that meet both physically in a physical location and also have a separate virtual meeting, but they don't necessarily meet at the same time or on the same day. And there are a few examples of that we've seen throughout the fellowship. And I don't know if that's in the nature of the pandemic and some members of a home group wanting to, there's a variety of reasons, I think, but some of them may be pandemic related versus what we would refer to post-pandemic Narcotics Anonymous. Another example of a hybrid meeting would be a hybrid service meeting. WSC 2018 was the first time there was virtual participants, and there was a motion that was created by the Iranian region, which was to allow members that could not attend or get to the United States for travel restriction reasons. And so that motion passed, and we had delegates from Iran, and we also had the alternate delegate from New Zealand that also attended virtually. So some things to consider when thinking of starting a hybrid meeting. Equipment is definitely one of them. So I think the best way to do it is to simulate what would it be like if we're having a virtual meeting, where you were actually physically at. And there's some considerations that you may want to consider. There's a lot of different ways to do virtual meetings. You don't necessarily have to have video on. If you want to have video on, you may have a camera. that camera may be pointed to a portion of the room or all of the room, depending upon what that group decides, their interpretation of, of what anonymity might mean in that space. So we've seen different things done by different groups. There definitely is not a one size fits all for all groups. Connectivity is an issue. So if you're connecting by phone, making sure you have a solid signal. If you're connecting via internet, making sure that you run an internet speed test and that you meet the requirements for whatever platform you're using. If you're using video, obviously that's going to require a little bit more bandwidth. If you're just using audio, that'll be the same too. And also to make sure, one of the other things to consider is if, for example, if your group has trusted servant positions, do you make those service positions available for those that are attending remotely? Is there someone that's sitting by the device that's connected to the virtual venue that is looking to see if it's a participation meeting, that there's ways for those participants to be able to participate and sort of like looking over, for example, if using Zoom and people are raising their hands to share, is there a way for them to share? The other part of it being the way that they actually hear in the meeting. There's a great number of resources on NA.Org/virtual. I saw Dennis is on here. There's a YouTube channel called NA.Virtual.Outreach that's done by a bunch of members in NA, and they've done some great videos on different setups you can use, like great microphones that are out there. There's been a lot of tried, true, and tested experimentation with various different microphones, various different speakers, things to consider when you're doing noise cancellation. A lot of interesting information that's available there. And again, if you have experience running hybrid meetings, please share that with us. Regarding finding virtual meetings, there is the the Meeting Finder app, which you could download on iTunes or the Apple App Store, or the, I said iTunes, the Apple App Store or the Android Store. And there's a lot of different things on this app. You can not only search meetings, you could put your clean data in there. You can find you can get the latest issued NAWS news, you can get surveys, you can make contributions. But yeah, so like the other thing too with this is that it's this admittedly is not the most accurate source of information. It's definitely been improved. I'll say this tongue in cheek. I'm one of the developers on the BMLT project and have been for the last 3 years. And so I know the benefits of meetings and groups maintaining their meeting schedules using the BMLT. And one of the great things about the BMLT, and World Services loves this, is that when you keep your BMLT information updated, that information can easily be sent. There's an exchange format that allows your server administrator to send that format directly to Lori at NA World Services, and she's able to import that file directly into the database, and it just keeps things updated more frequently. And there's been a lot of work to work on data quality and things related to virtual meetings. But yes, this is where you could find virtual meetings and phone line meetings. There's a variety of other sources as well that are listed on that virtual page that I mentioned. As far as registration of virtual meetings, this is an ongoing discussion. One of the questions that will likely be in the next survey is something related to what we've been hearing as a board, is that people want to be able to register virtual meetings as groups. And so with this, we're just wanting to ask the question back, is there any concerns around that? So look for that along with that March webinar that's coming up. And so there will be a discussion at WSC 2022 on the registration of virtual groups, meetings as groups. And like I said, there will, Lib also mentioned there's going to be a survey on this topic. Lastly, I just want to inform anybody, if they're not aware, like we set up an Instagram page a few months ago. There's almost 7,200 followers now. And there's a lot of really, really cool things that are posted on here. If you have memes or ideas for posts, there's an email address that we've created called socialmedia@na.org. If you do plan to post Pictures, keep in mind, they're going to be public domain. Make sure they don't have faces. And remember, this is a worldwide audience that we're trying to impact. For regions and zones, we do post event flyers, but just for regions and zones, just because of the limited amount of staff, we were getting bombarded with like area and flyers. We just had to be somewhat deterministic in what we could post. So we sort of limiting it to regional and zonal events. And yeah, so it's at Narcotics Anonymous is the Instagram handle. And that's it.